As we move into our last panel, we will have a program following that, which is a way for us to come together in conversation, talk about the issues, including those that we didn't talk enough about today, so that we can highlight going forward. But our final panel of the day looks at how young Texans are making an impact in their communities, statewide and beyond the ballot box. So why don't we go ahead and have our panel join us on stage, and I'm going to go ahead and introduce the panel as they get settled. Joel Castro is a conservative serving on his third term on Alvin City Council. Months after graduating high school in Alvin, Castro ran for city council, and when elected, was the youngest elected official in Texas. He has worked to implement common sense conservative policies, spur economic growth, improve infrastructure, and be fiscally responsible. He also volunteers his time mentoring young conservative trailblazers in Generation Z to run for office and win across the country with Run Gen Z. Lorenzo Salinas is a Master of Public Policy, Master of Social Work candidate at the University of Houston's Hobby School. Salinas has actively engaged in political social work, including as a graduate research assistant, analyzing energy policy impacts, and as a member of the City of Houston Food and Security Board of Directors. He's also involved with the Center for Civic and Public Policy Improvement, focusing on affordable housing, healthcare, education, and criminal justice. Vivian Zheng is a recent graduate from Rice University, where she was the presiding judge for the on-campus polling location and facilitated mayoral, midterm, primary, and presidential elections for thousands of students, faculty, and community members. She was also part of the successful initiative to make Election Day 2024 a non-instructional day at Rice. She will be attending law school in the fall and hopes to continue her work in elections and voter education. And our moderator, María Méndez, is the Texas Tribune service and engagement reporter. She works on efforts to better connect with Texans and writes explainers and guides. She strives to answer Texans' questions about politics and public policy and to help them find resources. Previously, she reported on public education at the Austin American-Statesman, border and business issues at Texas Public Radio, and politics and breaking news at the Dallas Morning News. So we want to close our day by giving those joining us an opportunity to reflect on the day's conversation, which we will do so right after this conversation. But I want to turn the program over to my colleague, Maria.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. And I'm glad that we still seem to have a lot of students here, or some. Our panel is going to focus on youth civic engagement. So yeah, let's get started. A question for all of you. What was it that first got you activated and wanting to get involved in your communities or in your specific roles?
Hello, everyone. It's good to see everyone here. What made me want to get involved in social justice initiatives was growing up, every Thanksgiving, me and my family would, deliver Meals on Wheels, and we did this ever since I was a young man. And that really warmed my heart and showed me that there's nothing more important than service to your fellow human being. And I've carried that all the way till now.
Hi, everybody. So, like it was mentioned in the introduction, I serve as the presiding judge for the Rice University on-campus polling location, and I got involved in working as a poll worker and just working as part of the election because the year that I turned 18, like the first year I could vote, was the 2020 presidential election. So obviously, huge election, very important during the COVID-19 pandemic. And so I knew it was really important for me to get involved and be able to kind of show my civic duty for the first time in that capacity. And so I'm originally from Indiana, and I served as a poll worker for the Indiana primary. And then when I came to Rice here in Houston, the fall of my freshman year was the presidential election. So I started working as a poll worker then, and then in the years to come, kind of taking a more leadership capacity as the presiding judge. And I've just been really inspired by the students around me and the community at Rice to become more civically engaged, take more initiatives to promote more voter education and accessibility on the Rice campus.
Howdy, my name is Joel. I proudly serve on Alvin City Council. One of the things that really got me engaged and wanting to get involved, and especially run, I ran for office as a teenager. I was eager in high school to really get involved because I was sick and tired of hearing my friends. Alvin's a small town, just it's about 40 minutes south of where we're at right now, about 30,000 people, and I was tired of seeing my friends saying they can't wait to leave. They can't wait to get out of town and just leave and never come back. And I thought, I was like, man, you know what? Alvin really provides the American dream that my family has yearned for so long. There's really great things to offer in this town, but it could always be better. And so I knew that I had a path forward to be able to make Alvin the best place to live, work, and worship. And we've been able to find people to help us achieve that goal. And I decided that there wasn't no better way, instead of just tweeting or posting on Instagram, than to actually run for office. And so just right out of high school, I decided to put my name on the ballot and end up getting elected at 18 and been there for 6 years now.
Great. Well, it's known that turnout among younger Texans tends to be lower. But there actually have been some strides in youth turnout, specifically from 2014. It was around 8%, and then it went up to 26% in 2018. Notably, that's when Beto O'Rourke ran for U.S. Senate. And then that did fall again to 22% during the midterms in 2022, according to Tufts University. But I'm curious what y'all think the issue is here. What's holding young people from going to the polls? Or do you think they're maybe just getting involved in other ways? We obviously see a lot of movement on social media. We've started seeing some people boycott businesses. So, yeah.
I think it is. I think, from my personal view, I think it is a bit of a misconception that young people are voting like less. 2020, young people got the highest increase they've ever had. I think it was about 10%. But I think it is also what you said, like we're getting engaged in other ways. So I've seen a lot of young, I say young people like I'm not young, but I see a lot of my cohorts. They often are very dedicated to social issues, and they're more aware than ever now because I think they're being hit in the face with the reality that decisions made in policy impact our everyday life. And I often say this to my friends, like, you have no choice but to be political, because everything from the transportation system you took to get here, or even sitting in this building, policy impacts everything. So I often say that they should be involved, and we are getting involved in other ways.
I think, to be honest, like, we as young people, we're just really lazy sometimes. And I think, especially because we're so used to having like everything directly on our phones and like everything directly in front of us, like telling us like exactly what we need to know like instantly. Sometimes in terms of getting out and going to the polls, that's not something that you know automatically. That's not something that you can like easily find and see every day. And so I think the average young person is just not really thinking about it, or they're not going out of their way to like look up where my polling location is, who's on my ballot, unless it's like on their social media feed or something like that. And so you mentioned this in the question, but I think that social media obviously is a positive and negative thing, but especially for our generation, I think can be really helpful to kind of spread the word about, oh, go vote on this day, and here's who's on your ballot, and here's the closest polling location. Especially like I've seen on Rice campus, some people didn't even know when election day was. And so having that accessibility and being able to share that information very quickly with your peers has been really helpful. But I think for people who aren't in that environment or who aren't actively seeking that, honestly, that's just like not something that they're thinking about. And to answer kind of the second part about how students and young people are being civically engaged in other ways, I do think that there's a lot of individuals who are kind of going above and beyond to care about the issues that they're most passionate about. And I really feel like, especially among like Gen Z, we like know how to do it. We know how to do it effectively, and especially with the social media, it's able to communicate like what issues we're most passionate about. And so I do feel like besides like showing up to the polls itself, I have seen a lot of civic duty and like civically engaged individuals kind of share that sentiment without like, or beyond just like their regular duty to vote. And so I think that's maybe not like everybody amongst our generation, but I think there are definitely specific individuals. So that's really great to see amongst the younger people.
I actually think it's really unfortunate that younger people aren't going out to vote, because it's a right that I think a lot of people take for granted. We have so many people. Our forefathers died for this right. We had people. Our founding fathers literally committed treason so they could be able to have representation. And I think it's. The American dream is an ideal that I believe that seems to be dwindling a little bit for whatever reason it might be. And I believe that it's up to the younger generation to be able to reignite that American dream. And, for example, when we see our friends that are going and posting on social media, we could ask them, well, did you vote? And 9 times out of 10, they'll probably say no, because they believe that their vote doesn't matter. But the few hundred people they see that are seeing that tweet on Twitter does matter. But the reality situation that every single vote does matter, especially when it comes to local elections, state representatives, in the state legislature. These are very impactful issues. A lot of the decisions that are being made today are issues that are going to affect us when we decide to settle down, have a family, when we decide to buy a house, when we decide to raise our children, when we decide that we want to retire one day, that these issues, when it comes, like, for example, for us, for like Social Security, we're going to be paying for Social Security until the day that we die, but we probably won't see a dime of it. When it comes to housing affordability, there's right now I'm trying to buy a house, and it's almost impossible in this market for anyone to be able to buy a house on their own. Healthcare is a huge issue. There's a lack of healthcare physicians all across the nation. Whether I believe that's probably because there's a lot of regulations instead of innovations, and there's a debate to be had on which side of which political philosophy you land in on how these issues are had. But the fact of the matter is we have to get out and vote. And as I look throughout the stage here and see the young people here, I think that's extremely amazing what Texas Tribune and what I think students at University of Houston that are here today, I mean, that is amazing that they're taking their time to be here, because that's way more effort than most people. There's a primary happening right now, and people aren't voting in that primary. The fact that they're spending their Tuesday here talking and learning more about policy is extremely important, because we are the leaders we're the next generation of leaders in the state and in this country, and there's no better time than now to be able to learn and hear good collaborative thoughts.
Joelle, you mentioned some issues, but I'm curious, Lorenzo and Vivian, what are the issues that you hear your peers be really passionate about?
A big issue and I would love to use this stage, just get on my soapbox, but a big issue that I hear a lot of my cohorts mention is diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging policies that are basically, Texas right now is hostile to anyone who isn't a heterosexual white male, and that's just the cold hard truth. And so I think I am seeing a lot of mobilization around that, and it's even as a Latinx male, it is very securing to see that, because even right now there's all this stuff on the news, and it's basically saying that my family are aliens and being described like insects, basically. And that it's very securing to see how the young folks are really getting behind DEIB and other inclusion initiatives.
I definitely agree. I think, especially at Rice, where the student body is like very diverse, and in the city of Houston, one of the most diverse cities in this country, diversity is such a big issue that like we as students and as younger people want to see. And I think another thing is too, just feeling like we're represented in politics. I think we look at like people in Washington, D.C. now, everyone who's in like the higher level of national politics, and it's hard to see a lot of representation in terms of like whether that be diversity or whether that even be like by age. There's not a lot of young people, obviously, who are representing the entire country. And so I think young people really care about like hearing that their voices are heard and hearing that they see people who look like them in positions of power, and also just kind of thinking about our future, like Joelle mentioned earlier, like thinking about when we are growing older and we are the ones who are going to be taking over the government and things like that, how we want to like see the future of America, because ultimately we're the ones who are going to be here for the longest. So we're the ones who kind of are trying to pave the way for what we want, what the country that we are going to live in is going to look like in the future.
And do y'all think there's room to bring young Texans and voters together around these issues? Like, is there room for bipartisanship?
Yeah, I believe that there is room for bipartisanship. I don't know what's so controversial about saying people, you belong as, because you're a human. I don't see what's so controversial about that. But, you know, when it comes to overall partisanship, I do think there's a middle ground that we need to find, and that, you know, we need to have conversations more often, just like this. Man, that's all.
I think so too. I think everybody wants to be represented in a certain way, and everyone wants to see that their voices are being heard. And so that's kind of something we can all agree on. So I think that goes beyond like the partisanship level, especially amongst like even showing up to vote, which is like the biggest thing that I've been involved in at Rice. It's a common goal. You want everyone to show up to vote. Doesn't matter who you're voting for. Just be educated and show up and have like the accessibility to vote. And so I think there's more common goals than we think amongst different populations, whether that be younger populations and older, or on a bipartisan level. So I think it's just important to see beyond those differences and like see the common goals of what we're trying to get from the people that are voting.
Yeah, you know, the reality of the situation is we all want a better Texas. We all want a better America. We may have different agreements on how we get there, but that's where we go and decide and have those constructive conversations. Margaret Thatcher is someone I look up to. She's an idol of mine. And one thing she said is, you know, it's important to be a convicted politician, not a consensus politician. And, you know, there are times where we're able to have those constructive conversations and meet in the middle, but there's also times where we have to stand our ground, where we have to be able to be principled and stay convicted in our beliefs and say, no, this is inherently wrong, and then we go from there. But I would say 9 times out of 10, there's probably room for us to have an open conversation. But you know, there's also important times where we have to stand firm in our convictions and say what is right and call out what is wrong. I don't want to start a debate here, but I heard Lorenzo say something about inclusion, about diversity and inclusion. I think everybody believes that's important. America is a melting pot, but I think that's a dangerous topic to be able to continue to embrace, because at the end of the day, we're all Americans, and I believe one of the reason why our politics is so diverse is we're almost tribal in a sense, that person's a Democrat, we can't talk to them. That person's Hispanic, they're not going to be with us, or that person's black or white or whatever it may be. That's in my opinion, I think that's a very Neanderthal tribal thought, because we're all Americans. And once we decide to start pinpointing people and putting labels on them, that's when we start to become divisive. And we have to be able to realize that we can work together to make the American dream alive, but we have to stop. We have to get rid of the labels. We have to be able to work together. And whether, doesn't matter if, someone is white, black, Hispanic. Alvin is a pretty predominantly white community. And I was elected as an 18-year-old Hispanic, second-generation American. Never once did I hear anything racist or did I hear anything because of my color, but it's about the content of your character, which I think Dr. Martin Luther King pointed out in his I Have a Dream speech. And so that's something we have to be able to look for when America right now is becoming so divisive, is that we don't enable the divisiveness, but we start looking at the content of people's character and stop looking at who they love or the color of their skin or whatever it may be, but realize that at the end of the day, we're all Americans wanting to live the American dream.
So it seems like there are some common goals, but maybe just different approaches. And I'd like to hear about your specific work areas. Vivian, you are the presiding judge at Rice's on-campus polling location. Can you talk about why that is significant, why it's important to have a polling location at a university?
Yeah, I think definitely having a student run, something that our polling location boasts is that every single one of our poll workers, the presiding judge, the alternate judge, are all students at Rice University, which is obviously a very unique polling location. I'm definitely the youngest presiding judge in Harris County, and I think it's important to have young people especially at the polling location because, you know, we're serving mostly students, and so it's important for them to see like familiar faces and for them to see that the people that are working at their polling location answering their questions are people that kind of understand their perspective when they're voting. And especially for me coming as an out-of-state student, there was a lot of like questions I had about how can I change my registration to Harris County and be able to vote here, even though I have like an out-of-state driver's license. And a lot of Rice students are also out-of-state students. So being able to answer those questions from like a firsthand experience is something that's really beneficial. And especially because prior to when I came to Rice, the polling location was not staffed by students. And so students would come, register to vote in Harris County, but have an out-of-state ID and then be turned away from the polls because they said that you cannot vote in Texas, which is not true if they have changed their registration to Harris County. And so that to me feels like a form of voter suppression from people who maybe just don't know the exact logistics and the forms you have to fill out if you do have an out-of-state ID. So I think it's really important to see representation from students who have been in the same position. And then also another initiative that I was a part of as part of the presiding judge was making the election day on campus a non-instructional day. So prior to this year, election day always had classes, so students had to go work around their class schedule to find time to vote. It caused a lot of issues because everyone was coming to the poll at the same time, so they had to wait 1 to 2 hours in line just to vote at the polling location. But as part of this initiative, this upcoming November election has no classes. Professors can't assign assignments due on election day, so students have flexibility to come vote whenever they want. If they're from a city where they can drive home on election day, they can go home and vote in their home city. Things like that I think have been really important because we as students know the issues that students are going through on election day, know the issues that we might have with voter accessibility. So I think it's just been really good to see that kind of representation and to be able to pass that on to like the future student body at Rice.
And Joelle, you were elected at the age of 18. I'm curious, how do you feel your age has affected your campaigning and your work on the city council? And have young voters played a role or been part of your strategy?
Yes, so I will say, and Lorenzo kind of talked about this in the beginning, like what got you involved and like what made you run. Honestly, it was, I don't think I could really just pinpoint like the exact moment where I was like, I'm gonna go do it. I think it was just all a haze for me. So I didn't make my campaign the first time I ran being young. I ran on being fiscally conservative. I ran on implementing common sense conservative policies. I ran on economic development, and I ran on improving outdated infrastructure. And those were the things that just resonated with people. Oh, and public safety. I remember election night, I went into a runoff election. I had two opponents, went into a runoff election. My opponent in the runoff, he was a veteran. He was 69 at the time. He was a businessman in town and has been involved in the city longer than I've been alive. And I thought to myself, like, well, shoot, there ain't no way in heck I'm going to be able to beat this. But I remember he did like a Facebook post saying, like, he said something like, oh, in high school, I wanted to be an astronaut, but that doesn't mean I'd make a good astronaut. And in high school, I wanted to be this. And I was like, well, this son of a gun trying to attack me because I was in high school. And anywho, just the negative campaign just kept on going. And I remember telling my team, because it takes a village to get elected. You can't do it on your own. I remember telling them, like, well, we can't, like, we have to keep on going. We stay with the positive message and keep on knocking doors. And so that's exactly what we did. We just knocked doors, positive message, stick to the policy discussions. And I never once mentioned my age until election night. I got a phone call, and someone said, it was a reporter, I think it was with the Tribune or somebody, something like the Tribune, or I hope it was the Tribune, I don't remember now. But they said, how does it feel to be the youngest elected official in Texas? And I said, oh, shoot. I was like, I didn't even think about that. And that was a pretty cool thing. And I remember going into city council and going into party events and realizing, like, man, I'm the only person with color in my hair and not drawing a Social Security check. That we need people that are going to be able to pave the path forward for future generations to come. And that's why I've been dedicated with Run Gen Z and other organizations to make sure that we get other young conservative trailblazers to win across Texas. And I would say, like, I'm very proud that, the title of young elected official isn't something to hold on to, but it's something to pass down. And so I've been able to pass that down to other council members in Texas, one in Kerrville, and then one recently within the last year was in DeSoto, Texas, in Liberty County. And he's 8-year-old, just got elected to council. And so it's another part of your question was young voters important in that. And so one of the things I was really lucky, I was just out of high school. So I remember I would Snapchat all my friends and say, hey, get out to vote, and tell your parents to get out and vote. And I was like just sitting at the polls and messaging them, telling them to get out to vote. And so they would come in and come vote. And I probably would not have been elected if it wasn't for really having really good friends. But you can't just run a social media campaign. You have to be able to meet voters where they're at. And I'm the type of guy, you don't reinvent the wheel, and block walking works. And the reality of the situation is that most voters are 65 and older. And so you have to be able to talk to them and understand where they're coming from, because they have a lot of wisdom, and you have to be able to learn. And you always have to have an open mind and being willing to hear people out, because there's a lot of things as an 18-year-old when I first got elected that I still had a whole bunch to be able to learn, because there's just life experience that I missed out on. So it's important to engage the younger voters, but it's also very important to listen and to have an open mind when it comes to older voters.
And then Lorenzo, you have a lot of experience, and you've been involved in different capacities as a graduate research assistant and then doing policy work. These are not necessarily obvious ways to get involved. I don't think I would have thought of these ways to get involved when I was, in school. So how did you find them, and how can other youth find these different ways to get involved in their communities?
So my primary introductions to getting involved were through the university system. Started my career at Lamar University. I'm a social worker by education and training. That kind of, y'all get the reason I talk about the things I talk about, I got to be a disruptor. I made notes to it. But yeah, I think the easiest way to find is to use your own strengths. And that's something we talk about in social work, is strengths-based. So if you're really good at writing, submit some research papers or any kind of white paper to any organization. I promise they will look at it. And if you want to get involved in policy, go to City Hall. Just start talking to people. 9 times out of 10, a city councilman is going to be walking through the lobby. You can ask them for an internship, and I guarantee they most likely are going to say yes. And there you go right here. You might say yes. And another way is to see the gap. So that's also another technique a lot of college students are trained in. And when they do research, they have to find that gap in the literature. So see the gap in your community. If you see that no one's focusing on LGBTQ plus populations in your community, get out there. I mean, you don't need an education to be a change maker. You don't need really anything. One of my friends in social work, she's done significant lobbying, and before she got educated, all she did was buy a lobbying 101 book and drove to Austin. So, yeah, so get out there, go do, and don't worry about this whole misconception of competence of, yeah, you're more than competent right now to make a change, and, go do it, do the work.
I think what Lorenzo says is super important. That it's super important to just even show up, because so many people don't show up, and so that one person, they go and even if they're struggling, it is super imperative that you just show up and speak your mind, because you never know what that other person you're talking to, how that may resonate with them, and so showing up is 60% of the work.
And before becoming involved, did you learn any lessons that significantly shifted or affected your specific policy perspectives?
Yes, as a social worker, we are deep believers in empathy, and I live my life by that, and that's really changed everything, because you can't sit in some box and act like it's okay because it's not happening to you. And this is nothing against what you said, but I know you said that, oh, they're not racist to me, so it's cool. It's not, it's you were the one concession, so I don't believe that we can make concessions, and I do believe that, it's important. Like, all of us on the stage are very privileged, and I don't, just because I talk somewhat proper and that I don't have an accent, or, I always lead with that viewpoint that I'm the very different, case. Beyond that, no one else is getting that same kind of treatment of being given the same opportunities. So I often think it's important for us to never lose empathy, and that's how I lead my life. I will never sit in a room and, just because I'm not going through it doesn't mean I can't understand it and I can't, be empowered by it and want to make a difference. I think that's our gift as humans. We can empathize with each other. And, it's often hard to just disregard someone's needs if you do know them. So when you do hear all these people, reporting on the border situation, they talk about them in very, I would say, non-people centered. So if they actually went out there and got to know some of the people that are just trying to make a way, I am a product of that. My grandfather came here in the 70s, and now I'm able to sit in front of y'all, and I'm able to go to college. I'm able to change my whole family dynamic. I've never had anyone that went to college. So empathy is beautiful.
I guess something that I learned while being part of the election process is that the election process in Texas is very interesting. Things change a lot, even in the years that I was working at the polling location. The devices change, the process changed, and so I think it's really important to really know all of the details and really take time to kind of be very adequate in learning how things work, especially if you're going to be part of the election process. And I think part of that comes with having confidence in yourself, especially this is a panel about young people, having confidence in yourself even if people aren't taking you as seriously. I think I've definitely had learning experiences where people older than me didn't believe that I was the presiding judge, didn't believe that I could be running the polling location, questioned me and tried to find the older people in the room to try to direct their questions towards, but kind of standing your ground and knowing no, I know how this works, I know my stuff, I know how to answer your questions, things like that is really important. But behind that, you have to really know your stuff. You have to know exactly, how to answer questions, what all the details and intricacies are. And I think especially in Harris County in the past, we've had some issues with the elections. And so just kind of putting on a front and being able to show yourself with confidence and being able to answer questions and kind of portraying to voters that this is a polling location that knows what's going on, and this is a polling location that, is putting on a fair and democratic electoral process is really important. So I think just knowing the details behind everything that you do, and being confident and being able to assert yourself, especially as a young person.
So I kind of have two different answers for this, and they both tie into what Lorenzo and Vivian said. So what really just sparked my passion of just loving this country was my great-grandmother who fled Mexico because the country just didn't offer anything, and she wanted to live the American dream. And she did everything in her power to be able to live the American dream in a legal, right way. And she brought my grandmother and my great aunt here, and she cleaned toilets at a hospital until about 10 years ago. She's 82 now, and she retired when she was 72 from cleaning toilets, and she did that every single day of her life because she knew that she had to work hard. And it's not about being privileged or anything, but it's about being dedication, having ambition, and working hard. There was a leader of my church once said, he was giving a talk, and someone said, wow, Bishop, you're very blessed. And he said, well, it seems like the harder I work, the more blessed I become. And so that sort of mentality it's very imperative to have. Is you can't have the victim mentality. You have to be able to put in work to be able to circum a lot of these differences. I think statistically, where my great grandmother ended up raising, ended up living, was Port Arthur, Texas, and that's where I was born. And Port Arthur, Texas, if everybody knows about where Port Arthur is, it's not exactly the best place to be able to raise a family and to live. I mean, there's a lot of gang violence, there's a lot of drugs and other situations out there. But it's all about how you apply yourself and how having a family structure be able to support you in the background. And my great grandmother was a really good role model for me. My mother had me when she was 18, and so my great grandmother raised me for the first 5 years of my life. And being able to have her wisdom and have her passion and have her faith to be able to guide me really just made me instill what it really is to be an American, because she told me how she was raised in Mexico and versus how the benefits that she's got to become as an American, and that living the American dream isn't a right, but it is something you have to work hard for. And that was really something that I wanted to be able to make sure that other generations had that benefit to be able to live that American dream, because it's something worth fighting for. And then when it comes to getting involved into politics, I had that passion in my background, but I remember I'm a bookworm, so I love history. And if you look all throughout history, you see, let's go all the way back to some of the apostles that Jesus appointed. Some of those apostles were the exact same age as Vivian, as Lorenzo, and as myself, and as you, Maria. They were the exact same age as us when Jesus appointed them. When you fast forward to the forefathers of our country, our founding fathers, those were also young individuals that took a chance to be able to take an experiment on this great American dream. They were the exact same age as us. If you move forward even out here in, let's say, Texas, where General Sam Houston first got elected to office at 24, at another young age. You fast forward even more to the people who stormed the beaches of Normandy to fight against Nazi Germany. I mean, those were people the exact same age as us. So it's always been younger generations to be able to pave the path forward for a better world, a better future. And history tends to repeat itself. So that's why it's so important that we be able to realize that younger people have every sort of right as anybody else to be able to fight for what they believe in, to make this world a better place. And it starts with us right here, right now, because there's a lot of issues happening in this world, no matter what aisle you stand on. And there's a lot of issues that we need to be able to fix. We are the problem solvers. And so it's up to the younger generation to be able to solve those problems and make sure that we put in our effort.
And I'm sure y'all are all really busy and have juggled a lot, in your specific roles and then as students. What keeps y'all motivated during those hard, busy moments? And especially when sometimes it seems like change is slow to come.
Yeah, it is. Change is slow, always has been. And that's kind of stresses the importance that we should be resilient in our fight. But what keeps me going is the people, seeing that problems still exist. People still aren't given a fair shot. Inequality is worse than ever. And knowing that these problems exist that we had 40 years ago, we're still talking about race, We need to do something. And that's what really keeps me going.
I think also the students and like people around me, every year when I like recruit for student poll workers, we always have like an overwhelming amount of interest. Like way too many people that want to work at the polls that I feel bad I have to like say no to some people. And even like taking, like this is gonna be my last year working as the presiding judge. So having people so eager to like take over as my successor really like makes me feel like I'm putting like this polling location into good hands, like really makes me feel glad that like Rice University especially is gonna be fine in the future in terms of like having students that are willing to show up. And also just like the certain individuals who, like I mentioned before, are always like going above and beyond, like taking extra time out of their class schedules, out of their busy lives to really care, like really push for the topics that they're passionate about and really do a lot of initiatives on campus to reach the student body. And I think seeing those fellow people, my students, fellow peers around me, and seeing how like we as students, like we're obviously very busy, but still make time for those things is really inspiring and makes me feel glad for the future.
There's a lot of things to be grateful for, and there's a lot of things to look forward for. I think one of the things that really just gives me, just reignites my fire is like panels like this, people like Lorenzo, people like Vivian, people like you, Maria, people like younger people from University of Houston. That stuff really fires me up because, for so long, especially when I was on city council, I was the only young guy on there. When I first got elected, I was the only young guy under 50. And so I would definitely feel like I was in my own world. It felt like I was doing it all alone. But it's people like them to be able to realize that it's not I'm not the only one. And we may have disagreements like Lorenzo and I had, but we both agree that there are issues and that there needs to be solutions to those. And we both agree that we want a better Texas, we want a better America. So that really just fires me up, knowing that there's a future ahead that's way more brighter than what we have right now. Another thing that fires me up is when it comes to like policy, when I'm on city council. There's a lot of times where I may be the lone no vote, or there's a lot of times where I may really be passionate about something. But then I go and I go back to door knocking, or I go to Kroger and I see someone that comes up to me and say, hey, like, for example, one huge policy win that we had was increasing homestead exemption to the max. And having someone came up to me and said, because of that, I'll be able to afford groceries more because inflation's just through the roof. And so we've been able to put more of their hard-earned monies in their pockets. And that's through good, forward-thinking, conservative-minded policies that they'll be able to have more money in their pockets so they can provide for their family. And so stuff like that really just helps me realize that everything that we're doing, that we're fighting for, is really worth doing, and nothing that's worth fighting for ever came easy. And so we have to persevere. We have to keep on going. We cannot get complacent.
And what do you want both young people and older people to really take away from this conversation?
I think I would like people to be empowered. Go out there, go get things done. I mean, y'all are more than capable, and not even young folks. I mean, everybody in this room. I don't want to seem like I'm, just focusing on one group. But everyone in this room should feel empowered to go out in your community, make a change, whether it's small or big. Every action matters. If the best you can do today is that you can text your friend and tell them about a certain bill that's coming through the legislator, that's the best you can do today. So don't be too hard on yourselves, and just do the work and do it at your own speed, and take care of yourselves also. I like to always, social workers, we like to stress the self-care aspect. So y'all take care of yourselves.
I think especially for young voters and young populations, like if you want to get involved in things beyond just voting, go work at your polling location, reach out to like the county, like the county administrator's office, see who the presiding judge of your polling location is, and ask them if you can work there. They're always like short staffed for people, and especially because like the voting devices are all like technology that we as young people like very easily know how to use. It's very easy to learn how to be a poll worker. It's a great way to give back to your community and also to be civically engaged to make sure that the election process goes smoothly. And also just in general, I think it's important to remember that in the end, we all kind of have the same goal, like we've been talking about, especially in terms of the polling locations and the elections. Like we all want people to be educated and like using their civic duty to vote. And so I think especially when we're trying to bridge gaps and conversations between younger and older populations, which I often have to do as the presiding judge, I think it's important to remember like we all have the same end goal in mind, and it's good to like see beyond our differences and kind of be able to work together. And I think that's really important moving forward, is like this sense of collaboration.
I think one thing I would tell people, one piece of advice for both generations, for younger and older generations, is that this country, it's going to be okay. We see throughout the media that things are failing, whether you look at conservative media or liberal media, and at the end of the day, this country has withstand way more stuff than what we're going through right now, and that we will be okay. That there's a greater power in charge, and that all we have to do is do what we believe is our very best work that we can. We do what we believe is right. And that we know that this country is going to remain resilient no matter what.
And I think we'll go to questions.
Absolutely. Thank you to the panel. We have a few minutes here if we have anyone in the audience who would like to ask a question.
Hello, I'm Kristen Foster, and I have been an educator for 20 years, and I just wanted to say hearing you just has made my year almost. I always have to keep hope alive, and I know there's young kids that were in my classroom that were actually listening. And when I hear a poll worker, an elected official, a social worker, I know democracy will not die. We're going to keep America great. So anyway, I just wanted to say thanks for sharing. You got to educate your friends and family and take somebody to the poll, and we will persevere. And thank you so much for your service.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to say that I've been energized by the three of you. I think it's just so great to see, especially in this day and age where everything is so negative and negative on Gen Z and this and that and the other. You guys are shining examples, and like you said, this kind of a forum would be good. I wish that more media outlets would focus on you and what you're doing, and young people like you, what you're doing, because you're right, it continues. We continue, and you are the next generation, and it's just very heartening to see your involvement in public life. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Vivian, Joel, Lorenzo, Maria, thank you guys. I do want to say that I have less of a question and more of an insight on, you said, why aren't many young people voting as much? I don't think people have any faith in this political economy. One of my good friends just the other day, nobody has mentioned that the United States is engaged in several, unauthorized and illegal wars. Nobody's mentioned that here today. But one of my good friends, just here in Houston, we have 2 billboards for, advocating for a war in Israel and Gaza. My homie, he sees this, he's like, why are they advertising and marketing in our city, in this country? So instead of, he has no power, what is he gonna do? He climbs up, he gets a rope, climbs up the billboard, gets up there, 90 feet, 100 feet into the air, and defaces this sign, right? This is graffiti, this is artist activism, right? For people who have no hope, it's to essentially try to destabilize this false sense of security that the political and commercial economy has set out for us right now. And so you mentioned earlier, Joelle, about we need more physicians, right? And Lorenzo, you mentioned about we need more DEI. And I think that this is so interesting because I love the Texas Tribune. I pay journalists. I subscribe to Glenn Greenwald, Ben Shapiro, and right now there is a fight with the American Association for Dermatology where they're trying to eliminate a DEI program, which is nothing essentially other than programs of support for young physicians of color to help them. This isn't just black people, because every time you say DEI, people think, oh, it's helping black people. No, it's helping brown people. Anybody of a skin tone that's darker than, well, you're kind of colored. I like your, but then you get what I'm saying. So there's a playbook being actively used right now by individuals like a guy named Chris Rufo, and they're threatening all these systems of support for us, right? So you may say, let's get rid of DEI, but I hear no one advocating for replacing these things. And regardless of how you actually may feel, it doesn't feel very sympathetic. It doesn't feel very compassionate, because last night I had dinner with 2 dermatologists, and they were telling me, I don't understand this resolution that's going to be voted on next month by the Academy of Dermatology. And in this resolution, it specifically says that DEI has elements of anti-Semitism. I don't know anybody who doesn't like any Jews. Everybody I know loves all people. What is your rationale for even saying something like that in front of a crowd of people? Please.
Yeah, sure. Go. Well, there's a lot to digest in that question. So, first you talked about wars. I think one of the problems with the generations is we've grown up in war. There's been an endless amount of wars. I recently lost my brother in August to suicide because he was a veteran. He was deployed. He was in the cavalry in Iraq. And one of the things I asked him, when I say, how do you feel when people say thank you for your service? He says, well, I didn't serve my country. I served someone else's country. And first of all, there's a huge issue with veterans committing suicide. There's 22 veterans a day commit suicide. So we aren't taking care of veterans as much as we should. That's because of the healthcare system that they have with the VA. And so and also mental health needs to be extremely looked into. Okay, all right. I got you.
Can we have a
I got you.
brief
And
response so we can get to maybe another
so,
question?
Okay. So I think we need to have a conversation about war and looking back into be able to protect our own American citizens and focus on protecting our veterans. But to DEI, I mean, I will blatantly say I'm in favor of getting rid of DEI, just because I do believe that there's so much more. America is so much more better than just pinpointing people based off the color of their skin and based off of who they are. I think we're so much better as a country, sir, than I would never judge you because of your skin. I would never judge you because of what you believe in, but judge you by the content of your character. And I think it's wrong, inherently wrong, that someone like let's say, let's just use an example of like a white male submits a resume, and then a Hispanic male like myself submits a resume as well, and I would get the job just because of the color of my skin. I want to get the job because of who I am and because of my accomplishments, not because of the color of my skin. And I believe as a country, we are way better than that. And we have to be able to realize that we are a melting pot of people, and that we have to be able to realize that we're all Americans at the end of the day, no matter the color of our skin. So that's what I believe in.
Thank you. And I think we have time for a few more questions.
I would just like to know how we as the younger generation can be taken seriously by the older generation, because I know they think we're ignorant, that we don't know, that we haven't experienced life as much as we have. But I mean, we're at these sessions for a reason. What can we do or say to prove that, you know, we can be responsible? Joel, I know you said you didn't run on a platform that you were young. So, you know, what could we do to show that we still have that experience and we can still, you know, prove that we can lead a country in the next generation? Thank you.
Show up. I think that's extremely important, is that you show up and you're persistent, and that you have an open ear and that you include yourself in these conversations. You have to make sure that you have a seat at the table. And I think Lorenzo pointed that earlier, is just showing up is a big part of it.
You don't need their approval. Don't look for it. You'll never get it. Don't even look for it. I think you're great. You can do amazing work. And we don't need anyone else's approval to engage civically, you know? And you don't need them to think you're competent enough, or, ooh, they're really good for this role. Like, no, if you think you're good enough, go ahead. And don't look for other people's approval. That's a bottomless hole.
Hello. Hello. Yes, so my name is Christian. I'm 31. I don't know if that qualifies as young, but I'm a student here at UHD. And my question goes like this. So my wife this year will qualify to be a U.S. citizen, which means that if she becomes a citizen before the election cycle, she will be able to participate in her first election as an American citizen. But as we were talking about it, she's the same age as me. She had this kind of sort of apathy, because she will tell me that she didn't see candidates that looked like her, but most importantly, candidates that had the same experiences as her in terms of age, in terms of climate change, in terms of the current home ownership crisis that we're living as young people here in America. So my question is, in terms of young voter participation, at what extent do you believe is actually affected by actual representation in American politics by young people?
I just want to say, first of all, congratulations to your wife to become an American citizen. That's amazing.
If you want to answer.
I guess I can talk about, I think it's important for young people. Well, honestly, if young people feel like they're not represented, you got to be like Joel and just be the representation that you want to see, right? And so I think besides that, I think that's why it's really important to be like not just a voter that's showing out, but a voter that's like educated. So obviously you're not going to see like a candidate that's like exactly 100% like what you want to see on the ballot. But I think it's important to like know what the issues that you care about are, and then pick the candidates that you feel like represent your interests the best for those issues. But I think the biggest solution to that problem is to just have, as young people, like we need to be the ones that are stepping up and stepping into these positions so we can see that representation.
But also, your wife and you have just as much authority as anybody else to drive the conversation. You as a voter can be able to tell your representative or the candidate that you plan on voting for what issue is most important to you. I think a lot of issues right now are extremely polarizing, and maybe because it gets the media, maybe it looks good on a mailer, but there's also like healthcare and like housing, where these are issues that are affecting Americans every single day, and it's something we need to be able to talk about. We need to start talking about these policy issues and start ask about the solutions for them. And so that doesn't start unless the voters start driving that narrative, driving the story. And so I would say that you and your wife have every sort of authority to be able to start driving that narrative and driving the story on that.
Hello, it's great to see you all here. So you have been talking a lot about civic engagement, and there is a larger body called community engagement, and I think civic engagement is a part of that. So I think the question that this young man asked started to get to some of the issues that I was thinking about, and that is one of the cardinal rules of community engagement, of any kind of engagement with communities, is that you have to talk to communities and ask them what are their issues. So we can't just be sitting here or in our chairs and saying, this is what you need to get out and vote. Vote for what? You know, and then you tell people that, yes, you have issues and you should bring them up. People are not that assertive, right? Most people are passive or they're nervous about how to bring up issues. So I think it's the job of people like you or other people here at our university, I'm here at UH downtown, to actually go out and talk to community members and say, hey, what is it that you guys need and how is it that we can help you? So I want to ask you guys, how much do you do by going out into the communities and talking to people, maybe at community meetings, at their church locations? Like, what's the problem that this community is having? And it may be things like homelessness or healthcare or you know, other things like that, food insecurities, et cetera. Thanks.
So I try to spend as much time as I can out in the community because, you know, at CCPPI, we work in 3rd Ward and South Union OST. So I make it a mission to not be in my office most of the day, just so I can be out connecting with people, finding out what the issues are. And one thing I can say when it comes to marginalized communities, I don't know about communities that are doing well. Never been in one of those. But I can tell you about marginalized communities. And for those communities, I think we are aware of the issues that we're having. It's just, they seem so insurmountable. It's kind of like looking at Mount Everest, you know? Like we see this and we're like, I can't change that. What's going on, you know? And I think that's also something that, you know, is shown when I'm out there in the community engaging. Many people are aware, you know, and they know the steps that need to be taken. It's just when you get down in the politics of things, it plays out differently.
We always thought we knew, right? And we go out there and try to work on an issue, and then somebody tells us, well, you know, yes, that's an issue, but our more immediate issue is X. Really need help in that.
So I could just say on a city perspective is, I mean, that's what we do day in and day out. When we go and talk to Rotary clubs, when we're members of other civic organizations like Lions clubs or whatnot, we have to be able to meet people where they're at. And I think that's a lot of issues where politicians seem to think that people should go to them, where I believe we have to go to the voters. You know, if we want to win a war, you got to get in the battlefield, right? And so it's really important to be able to meet people where they're at and have those conversations and ask them what issues are they having. Because I don't know what I don't know. And you can't become a better place, which I think is what everybody's goal is, if you don't know the issues that are happening. You know, we can be in tune to media, we can be in tune to on social media, but if we don't have those real conversations with real people, then how do we expect to fix the issues that are happening? And so when it comes to the local level, I mean, whether it's your trash being picked up on time or, you know, the water before you take a shower is working or a pothole down the street, we have to be able to know those things. So that's why it's extremely important to talk to your neighbors about issues, talk to HOAs, Rotary clubs, because those issues are affecting people each and every day.
Hi, Joel.
Howdy.
I'm Barbara. I'm a registered nurse, cardiovascular ICU. We have something in common. You mentioned Port Arthur.
BAT, hold it down.
Okay, I want to read something, and I'm not going to be defensive toward you. This is a learning for all of us. We become divisive when people denigrate others. That denigration is dividing us from seeing ourselves as fully American. So we challenge people degrading others, and then we're accused of being tribal. I want to know, your mother, you were born in Port Arthur. I want to tell you a little history about Port Arthur. You were born there, you weren't raised there, right? Port Arthur is going down economically because big businesses are moving away from there because it's predominantly Black. In that time, we were taught to care for each other. The drugs you're talking about that Port Arthur has, you know, Port Arthur's drugs and this and that, all over America has that. I want to know, since you were born there and your family, your mom and dad were from there, I think they lived there, right? What have you done lately to go and help that community? I'm asking a question.
Yeah. Good question. I think when it comes to Port Arthur specifically, I don't really have much ties there. My family still lives there, so I go visit them. My great-grandmother still lives there. So when it comes to Port Arthur specifically, really nothing. But when it comes to a greater solution, like you said, where the drug problems are happening all across the state and all across America, we have to be able to drive the conversation of being able to find solutions to this. So in my full-time job, I work for an organization that focuses on public policy, really free market and limited government solutions. One of the things that I think is really imperative, like you mentioned, drugs, fentanyl. You know, fentanyl has killed more people than people in the Iraq, Afghanistan, and the Vietnam War combined. Fentanyl is one of the most deadliest things to the younger generation right now. And so we have to be able to drive those conversations of where is this fentanyl coming from? How do we stop it? And those are things that I've been working on ever since I've been elected, just be able to make sure that, one, we get good people elected to be able to have solutions to those policy issues, but also to be able to drive the conversations on those issues so people are aware of what's affecting them in their neighborhoods. I guess I can talk on more of a personal level of what I've done. I don't know if that really applies to what we're talking about.
I'm just challenging you. That's all.
Yeah, that's fine. I appreciate challenge.
The people that are there, the people that are there, because we can't talk, I can't stay up here very long because I have to wrap this up. Mm-hmm. They're not bringing fentanyl on their own because it's an impoverished area.
Yeah.
The refineries have drained all the hope, everything from where I was born. I go back home, I took my granddaughters there. One of them said, I'm so depressed, I'd like to take all these people with me out of this town. I said, but what you do, because she's a student at UT, and she was on the dean's list. She said, I will go back there and see if I can help them, because they need help. Yeah. Because predominantly right now, it's a lot of Hispanics that are moving into Port Arthur, and they're gonna need help.
Yeah.
Because are they gonna be part of this problem? Are they gonna be probably, the cure for helping the people that are predominantly there before them, Port Arthur? Because if it wasn't a place for Hispanics to migrate to, they wouldn't be there, because Hispanics are oriented like blacks are oriented to family and whites. Everybody wants their family treated right. So that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and
do something, go back and do a little something. It doesn't have to be, a little something grows to be a big something. Just go out and see what you can do there.
Yeah, for sure. And I appreciate your challenge. But I think that's also what's imperative is that energy is a huge driver in that economy. Yes, and so we have to be able to have people in office that are energy focused and that are willing to grow the economy. And instead of relying on regulations that hurt businesses and kill jobs, to rely on innovation that brings in jobs and bring people to have careers and be able to live their American dream and provide for their family.
Thank you all, and I think we're actually going to have more conversations after this in small groups. So
yeah, I just want to thank our last panel and for everyone gathered here for the questions and the challenge.